Go for it.
Hello and welcome, Julian Ryan, the chair of the SIO Stories and Organization Group. And today we're here to welcome Artem Mushin-Makedonskiy to talk to us about values at work, practical tips and tricks. So I'm going to change gears here and make you the host so you can take it from here and we can sit back and enjoy your presentation. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. Welcome, everyone. Let's do the talk on the values and values at work specifically, because what I do is I focus on organizational work, and I've prepared some slides for you, obviously, because that's the power ritual of a shaman, of somebody who is, this weird dude with a stick performing magic tricks. That's my form of magic, the consulting magic. So let's go into it. And what I will be drawing from today is based entirely on the projects we carried out at Academy Historia, which is my humble group of explorers of storytelling in Russia, our team. And while our goal for today is basically to explore several things, we'll talk about how to craft story eliciting questions for values, Russia style. Then we'll discuss how to elicit stories from leaders and ground floor employees. And we'll talk about how to use technology for transmitting these stories. And finally, if we have the time, we will talk a bit about the spiral dynamics approach and how it is connected to storytelling and story eliciting. So let's just dive right in. So how do we craft the questions to elicit stories connected to values? Based on the projects we did, I can see that four approaches work in Russia especially well, and they can be summed up in this small slide here. So we're always looking for moments of pure pride when somebody achieved a great result and was not proud of the result, but was actually purely pride about how he achieved it. So it may be something minor, and it doesn't even matter what kind of result it is, but the pride should be pure in terms of it's about the way it was achieved. So we had this small episode when our one of the leaders of a building company here in Russia, the construction company, they are actually selling the flats that they build. So what they did was the leader of the company told a small story about a guy selling the flat and his client saying back, "Well, I don't understand. I bought the ready to go flat. It's not ready to go." And he's like, "Okay, well, okay, sir, I understand your concerns. What happened?" And the guy is really mad. He's like red in the Zoom room. He says, "There is no teapot. I cannot boil tea. What? Are you kidding me? This is ready to go flat. You're seriously selling this?" So what this guy did, the accountant, he went down the store. He bought this like a good electric teapot. He tied it up with a rope, like red beautiful rope, and he just gave it to the new flat owner. And this was like the minor thing. Just it's not like Zappa style of 10-hour calls. It's not like this. But this is again a moment of pure pride for somebody who just did something small. But the way he did it with humility and with acceptance was the best part. Then we look for the hidden choice moments. Why hidden? Because the choice moments is not so good for people in Russia. It's like I tried asking for tell me about a moment you chose between right and easy, and that's a good eliciting question. But then again, people tend to omit it because they're like a bit shy here in Russia. So we're going for the hidden choice. So instead of going for tell me about a moment when you were choosing between the right and the easy way, I added the part where it says a moment when you chose between the right and the easy, and nobody could have ever known which of them you chose, but you still chose the right way. So this small adage, gives us a bonus because for Russian audience, it takes off this, bravado, this whole posh and style. It can be a quiet story, but it is really powerful. So the hidden part. Then we go for the non-obligatory challenge, which is basically a way to elicit stories in companies that we worked with this store that sells constructing materials, and they had one of the values they had was perseverance. And what we did was we were asking for challenges they were facing. There were a lot of them, but then we started to ask them about the challenges that they themselves willingly put themselves into. And this really changed the gear. So instead of going for all the challenges, we were looking for free will challenges. And this really matched the value. So it worked great. And finally, the moral-based eliminations. We had this one leader telling us about a group of bus drivers who came to a halt and just stopped the whole construction because their salary was frozen because the company had a crisis. And they just stopped working. And what the company did, a lot of people just sat down in the buses of the company and started doing work for them to eliminate total failure and breakdown. And several weeks later, the crisis was solved, and like 35% of these people who got on strike got fired that day, like immediately, without any ado, anything, just fired immediately. This story is actually very, very tough for Russians. It's really singing this bell. It's like ringing this bell that says, "Don't do this," because that breaks our code. And instead, they're going for open discussions, and that's a clear way. So how do we elicit these stories and dialogues? And here are just two clues that I witnessed. First, I tried to pose story eliciting questions to the leaders of the company, and it just didn't work because they didn't understand what I was going for. They were keeping talking about how great they were, how great their teams are, how they're awesome. And suddenly I realized at some point that they are actually defending themselves. Like, just imagine the situation. You are an awesome experienced leader, and some new guy in a shirt comes down to your Zoom room and says, "Okay, tell me a story." And you're like, "This is shady. I'm not going there." So instead, what I went for results. So with this bright sales leader, I asked, "So what do you do?" So I know you sell stuff, but what do you do specifically? So he started explaining me the whole difficult systems of how the sales goes and the whole process is. It was like a very long talk. And then I said, "Okay, what's the most difficult part about it?" And he says, "Oh, yeah, that's clear. This part when we switch from one manager to the other, because when you give the client from one manager to the other, it's like shady for the client. So we that's just the more like the best part." So I said, "Okay, well, tell me about the moment when you saw one of your people doing great at that moment, but not being obliged to, just doing great on his free will, and you were really surprised by how he achieved the result." And he said, "Well, that was a time when we were passing this thing to the next manager, and the new manager, instead of going for like a separate meeting, she actually dressed up well. She tied the beautiful red rope of the color of the organization to the contract that she was about to give to the client, and she went down to his hall where they were meeting with this first manager that led this client. She went in there and said, "Okay, my name is Maria. I'm here, your new manager, and here's a gift for you, your new contract, if you're willing to sign it." So she sat down with them and spent some extra time, which she was totally not obliged to do. It's not her part of her process. But really, this was the fastest signature on the contract from the client in a year. And we just immediately understood how proactivity is the key value there, because you don't have to do it, but she did it, and she was valued by her leader. The second thing is about eliciting stories from employees, which is a tricky part because Russians are a hell of people who are closed off, and the lower you are in the structure, the more closed off you are. So instead of going for asking about their own value moments, we were going for moments when they saw values going live around them. And there was a moment when this girl I was asking for the values of the company, she went for saying, "Well, we are very supportive." And I said, "Well, what does it mean? Like, do you support anyone?" And she said, "Yeah, I support everyone." And I'm like, "Okay." She says everyone, and like usually and all the time, we are not going there. There's not going to be any stories. It's just one big valuation. And I said, "Okay, well, you were like there were a few first days in the company for you. Tell me about the time when you felt a totally different level of support compared to the previous place, towards yourself, of course." And she said, "Okay, yeah, that's easy. So when I was working in the dial room, we had like, oh, everyone is on the phone constantly, and I was like the second day, and I didn't know something, so I paused the client, and I turned to my colleagues on the left and said, I need your help. And he said, well, I'm busy with the client, solve it yourself. And I'm like just sitting there miserable, and then eight colleagues stand up, put their headphones down, and said, you're not doing it right, this is not the way we do it here, help her. And he's like, okay, yeah, totally, guys, my bad. And he just turns back and he helps me. So 8 people just suddenly randomly stood up and helped me. And that was the moment when I felt that there's something special. So these kinds of stories are really very easy to dig out because people are really generous in telling who helped them. But the higher we go in the hierarchy, the more difficult it is to find the stories when people are good towards you, because let's admit it, nobody is good to the leaders in the top, like sea level. They're just miserable people in the most of the, I'm just kidding. So, okay. The next key thing here that I discovered is that the real interview for you begins when they really think it's over. Like the moment I've pressed stop recording in Zoom, it's like, and then I just go for, okay, well, what do you do at work? Just, tell me for fun. And they went for the craziest stories, like the darkest secrets pouring out. And I just had my recorder on the table. So it's here, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so great. It's so bad that I'm not recording it. I mean, this is a great material. And they go like, yeah, that's a drag. And I'm like, do you mind if I record it? And he's like, well, I'm never going to tell it this way once again. You don't have to. And I just show them the phone and like, and there for the moment, this there is a mixture of great emotions, this cocktail of anger and then pleasure, and then it ends with pleasure every time. So everyone who I did this trick with were really agreeing to the part where we share this story because it was really good. And yeah, that's the major finding for me. I know it's this may be obvious for somebody who's doing interviews for such a long time, but again, and the second thing that I've discovered in terms of the interview part, not about the listing, is about you moments. I think it's a Russian specialty, but you might recognize it. So sometimes when people start telling stories, they actually, instead of going for what I did or what he did, they go for, well, Artem, working in an unpleasant place, you've asking me a question. Well, imagine yourself being in an unpleasant place, and they suddenly shift from telling about I, me, mine into telling you, and they're actually trying to tell a story about you, but they're actually talking about themselves, which is really strange. But first time I noticed it, I really tried to dig deeper, and I faced a lot of barriers. And then this was actually the moment with the story on the lines. This was actually it. So first where I went is I went for the misery moments from the last place of work. I said, well, have you had any miserable moments? And she said, well, yeah. Well, what are you miserable about at your work? When nobody's supporting you, when everybody's treating you like trash. And I'm like, I'm not even there in this story, but she's talking about me, about you. And so what she did was she was talking you language, and I went, okay, give me an example. It took me like 3 or 4 tries to get to this amazing story where she didn't feel miserable, but I didn't get to the part where she felt miserable in her previous job. This was not my task, by the way. My task was to identify in an appreciative way the values in the new place where she was working at. But again, every time I hear you in the speech, I feel that there is a strong emotion. People are like building a wall between them and this story, and this just resonates with me. So that's about it for the eliciting part. You might ask the questions later, so we're just sprinting through it. So how do we use technology to make value stories? And I'm not the brightest tech guy. Like there was a time when I was a DJ at the party and in the psychology bachelor's party, and I'm not talking about wedding. I'm like, the students party. So what we did was we were playing music, and that I used my best technical skills when the PC and the computer were starting lagging. I poured down cold water into a cup and placed it on the computer, and everyone went to me like, wow, how did you fix it? I'm like, cold war, man. That's the top level of my technical skills, literally. So that's the top of it. So I'm not going to open like America to you right now. So what we did was we pre-recorded, we cut, and then we uploaded the stories to YouTube. And then this construction company that we were working in, we placed the QR codes around the room with stories told by the leaders of the company. That led to the pre-recorded flicks with the audio, not the video, because we had to cut like a lot out of it because they were giving us like rough diamonds and we had to make it look like it was a really structured story. And then we hid it around. And what I said, why hide this? That's stupid. But what we did was we were playing a game. So they were actually seeking out these pictures, scanning them with their QR codes. And I told them, like, this is exactly what's happening in the organization. And they were like, why? And I went for this small metaphor because when we're looking for stories, we're trying to look for beautiful diamonds, like ring-based, like this kind of, proposing diamonds. But then again, there are no such things in the world. We have only rough diamonds around us, and we have to really be attentive to find them around us. And I encourage them to find these stories. And when they're listened, I said, do not judge. Try to listen to what you value in that story. Just open your mind to it. And they did. I'm just going to show you real quick a video of this project that they actually shoot by themselves. It's nothing that I did on my own because again, low technical capabilities. Let me just show it to you real quick. And I'm going to comment it, by the way. So this is a technical company. First, we did a workshop where I explained what's value story, what's a story by itself. And they're listening and they've been practicing in pairs, like telling the stories, the personal moments. In groups of 3, they received feedback. And went for a lot of storytelling there. We can see the masks on the faces, so it's COVID times for somebody. And then we actually got into the part of scanning. So they are scanning the QR codes and listening for the stories. And as you can see, the key feature is it's really easy this way. And they're all unique in design in terms of there's a name on each story. And there is like something small written. And after they got inspired, each of the teams got into story eliciting mode. So right now, sometime now, you will see a list of questions. Yeah, this is the A4 letter, the A4 paper with a set of questions, this one. It's actually the list of questions that we created for this company to elicit their value stories. So we gave it out and they gathered stories in groups, and then they handed these stickers, each with the name of the story. And the funnier the name, the more votes it had in the final round. So they chose which story to listen to. And then they recorded these stories right after this short break. So we ended like with 55, I guess, stories after 3 hours. And they were all like recorded on camera and then sent out to the company. And it really encouraged them in terms of they went for an additional round. So this year they're doing the story collection in all of the company, and they're training a squad of story collectors who are writing the questions to story elicit and so on. So one final thought about the spiral dynamics. I had pleasure to work with a company who was working with a spiral dynamics approach. It's based on Don Back's and Christopher Cohen's research. And basically what it has to it is several layers of corporate structure, corporate culture. It all starts with literally no control, and then we go into power, rules, success, etc., etc. And the key thing here was that in the company I work with, it was a manufacturing company. They were like really feeling bad that they had this power culture where there are strong leaders in every division and they define the rules. There are actually no rules there, just, chaos, and every leader pulls in his way. And that's a good way to, that's a good culture. There are no good and bad cultures there. This was good for them, but they were trying desperately to move into the rules culture. And the rules culture is different because everything is based on the same metrics, the same processes, the same rules, the same divisions. The leaders don't have much power because there's like the power is fixed on paper. And what is so special about this model is that every next level grows from what was on the previous level. It's an evolution, not a revolution. So when we were creating these questions to elicit stories in an appreciative inquiry form, what we did was we tried to go for moments when people on the team obliged to the rules, despite the leader being against it, only to get the leader on the side of the person who obliged the rules in the end. So this complex question hides two things. First, a person is obliging the rules, so the value is the value behavior is there. Second, the leader is against it, but then again, in the end, he is for it. So we do not destroy, we build from the previous level, build from the leaders that are there. The beauty of this question was that it crushed the brains of the HR of the company entirely, and we really collected like 3 or 4 stories out of 20 people. But boy, these 4 stories were amazing, because 2 of them were about the HR director opposing the CEO of the company. One was about a financial director opposing a marketing director and playing by the rule book against the person who was really, really charismatic and winning his attention and his trust. And we really used these 3 stories to encourage people on the lower levels that it is good to play by the rule book. And it really works like a charm, because if we measure the values expressed in voice, which our partner is doing right now, we can see that there is a movement in the right direction. I cannot say that it's like done, but we know that corporate culture does not change fast. And it's like a company of 5,000 people with several places of manufacturing across Russia. So it's really taking time. But what I've learned throughout this way was that you can really build a question based on anything if you have a background theory of what you're going for. So that's basically it for my short version of the presentation. And once again, I really invite you in for the Storify Your Leadership online conference that will start the 22nd of March, because there will be a lot of people talking about values who know a lot more than I do and not on that topic, I hope. Yeah, and I'm ready to answer all of the questions you might have. All yours. Thank you for listening.
So, Artem, will you put the link for your conference back in the chat, please?
Of course,
Thank
I will.
you.
I will actually put an extra link, because when we were doing these projects, I came to a conclusion that one of the reasons people are failing in terms of collecting stories is that they don't have a habit. When you have a habit of seeing stories in life, yeah, it's easier. But how to develop a habit? It's like, okay, sit down for 5 minutes every day and just write one event of your day. Sounds easy, but without constant notifications or something buzzing in your hand, it just doesn't work. So what I did was I created a special chatbot. It's called I'm So Storybot, and it really notifies people about writing down this event. It's absolutely free and anonymous. And what is especially good about it, automatically create an Excel file which has all of the stories you've gathered with names, descriptions, hashtags, etc. And again, it's anonymous, so nobody will see it. No sales. So you can have it, you can share it, whatever you want to do with it. It's in Telegram, and yeah, it's all yours. The conference is the second link. It really worked for a lot of companies because people just brought their Excels to me with funny names like Icy Waters, and that worked.
So why don't we start some questions for everybody while we have the time? That'd be great. Gonna unmute folks. Artem, you're gonna have to unmute. You're the host at the moment.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, I would love to answer them. Yep, go for it, Zara.
I'd like to know more about the levels of the story dynamics spiral, the spiral dynamics.
Yeah, like the whole approach,
Or
or
just what the levels are? Is that easy?
honestly, I don't remember the whole system, but
Okay.
there is a certain beauty to it because the authors have this underlying idea that the culture is shifting from left to right, like this ball in the line swinging. And first we go into family kind of culture that is just centered around one founder. Then, as the company grows, we go into the power structure where there are several leaders, and then we shift back when there's like more structure, rule structure.
Yeah, well,
Then we go in left, and instead of rules and fixed rules, we have the core measure is success and going faster, better, etc. Then we go into synthesis and upwards and upwards. So there is a certain beauty to it. I cannot express it except especially in English. But Don Beck has a great book about it, and yeah, I really suggest reading it. So that's a great source.
thank you. That's really interesting.
You're welcome. Yes, Lenny, go for it.
Artem, I am envious of your sort of global perspective of all the people that you have been learning from, listening to, because of the way you've so beautifully pulled together people from all over the world. What have you discovered in that about cultural differences in how you prompt or pull a story, or is what you shared with your work? I was fascinated in Russia. Would you have a different slant or approach if you were working within a different culture?
Yeah, I really discovered that the language is key here. For instance, I was working with this woman in Singapore that was really, she had two languages, like English and Chinese, and her native language was Chinese. And at some point she said that she doesn't quite understand my questions that I pose. And I said, like, why? And she said, well, you have these verbs that are connected to certain time. And I said, well, what's so special about it? She explained, and I'm not going for true definitions here, but she said, like, we don't have a differentiator between past, future, and present. In Chinese, it's all the same. You can say one phrase, and you understand the time by context. So if you say on the wedding, you realize which wedding was it, and then you realize when it is on the line. So when they say a phrase, it can be actually connected to 3 times. So it's liminal. It's there, here, and now. And that is actually a thing. So I think that language really affects it. But apart from that, I honestly think that the questions work well in any culture if they are aimed at specific moments in time in life. And whoever asks, they all like starting to list questions they love using on the sessions. I know that Sean Callahan has his like character trumps credentials set of questions on the website. So I guess that's pretty much universal.
I really appreciated how you talked about the difference of where you start with a prompt, whether you're meeting at the sea level or below, and that it's a different way in to get the story and the information due to vulnerability or any number of reasons. Really interesting.
You're welcome.
Artem, I enjoyed what you were saying about the interview part, about how it's always the last few minutes that happens. It happens in a counseling session. It also happens in an interview where all the gold is usually buried in those few minutes. And and I also appreciate what you were talking about, that transfer, that use of you, this happens to you, is a great sign that there's more to be digging, that there's more emotion that they haven't unpacked yet. So that's really was interesting to hear you say that as well. So thank you.
Great. Love it.
Anyone else? We have a few here.
Yes, Sue and Tom. Ladies first.
Now, I was wondering whether or not those last moments, you were saying that you had it recorded on the iPhone, and they didn't know it until, I guess I'm understanding a little bit later, you asked if it was okay.
Of course. So
Exactly. So I was just wondering whether it had changed after they found out that you were recording it on the iPhone, if there was any change.
Yeah, there was a certain change, but I usually kept this secret until I realized that, okay, no, that's enough. And then I went for like this sincere like apathy with, oh, Greg, it's a pity that we didn't record that part. And they were like, yeah, there was some material. So I gave them the ability to say, yes, this was great material. If they didn't go there and they say, like, this was worthless, I just deleted it because they wouldn't agree. And if they went for, yes, that's a drag, but well, what do you know? I said, and they were actually pleased because, you know, they were already saying it was great, so they couldn't back out.
That's helpful. Thank
You're welcome. Tom, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, Artem, I'm really appreciating some of the nuance in your question of like not just challenges that people faced, but challenges that they kind of self-imposed that weren't obligatory. I love that nuance. And I was also interested in the recordings that you have of the stories. Did you have, can you take us through that process a little bit more? I know you said that you have all these rough diamonds. There are no diamonds. Do you ever have people record the story a series of times until they get it right? Or is it always just through editing?
Depends. It really depends. Sometimes let me just give you an example here. I don't have this. I won't use the demonstration on the screen. So, for instance, we had a project with Bacardi, and they were training their trade ambassadors to tell the stories of the brand, because in Russia there is a reality that in the 90s, Bacardi was very limited, no pun intended, in terms of the import, and it turned out to be a drink that is not appreciated because it's first it's like something not so special. It's like everywhere, and then it's a drink for, I'm sorry, moms and grandmas. It's not cool. It's just an image of any Bacardi drink for Russians. And they were really battling against it because it has the rich history and the qualities there. So what we did there, we collected, we created a story bank for them. And the stories that were in the bank were there after they learned how to structure and tell the stories with some, several factors to them. So that they still keep this fresh feeling, but they were a bit more crafted than the regular ones. And for the projects on the values, what I did was I recorded 1 hour or 2 hour session of an interview, and then I just cut it as much as possible. For instance, we had this interview where the person started the story and then told it till the end, and then we revisited it 15 minutes later because she added a part in the middle. And I was really going for cutting it and replacing the bits so that in the recording, it sounds at least structured, at least the flow of time is correct. But we didn't add anything because there was no ability to add. Because when we start adding, the life goes out of them. It's just, hollow stories. Like in the Instagram stories, you can see these people reading the lines. So it just doesn't feel right. So we did this, and then we got an agreement from people that okay, this is your story, and they were every time they were like, oh my, good storyteller, and I'm like, yeah, you are, definitely, that's true, and there's no and for some of them this is a dark part. For one of the people, she was an HR director. I showed her version before and after the editing. And afterwards, she agreed for personal coaching and storytelling. I'm not very proud of that sale, by the way. I'm not proud. I just wanted to show her that coaching is good for her. And she eventually said that really that was the best trick she could, I could possibly use to persuade her to look at the structure in a different way, because she was really into not into storytelling. She said that it's just some BS technique from America, something like this. We have this quite a lot. 90% of the HR directors are like this. 100% of CEOs. It's a tough market. But yeah, we're moving. I'm sorry for the long reply. I hope you got the part you were looking for.
Yes, that's helpful. Thanks for taking us through it.
You're welcome.
So how are we doing on, we're a few minutes before the hour. I know we had a little later start, but we want to appreciate, so if you can repeat again, like your event, and also Sarah, if you can also share some of the things that are coming up. I know we have Bill Brantley and I are meeting with some of his co-meeting mates down in Maryland virtually this weekend to talk about the conference he's inviting us to be part of in the summer. But Artem, back to you for your final closing marks, and then for your lead off into our next session.
Okay. So for the next week, the 22nd of March, we have the amazing Storify Your Leadership Conference, which is totally free. We have 34 experts from all around the world who have been in storytelling for 15 years or more. And we are going to explore what leadership is and how stories can change it for the better to make it more sustainable. And this is where we're going for. And actually, the next speaker for the SEO Lab, Mary Alice Arthur, is going to be there on the 26th of March. She is presenting there. And we are going to find the date somewhere in April where she will come to the next lab of our humble group.
Thank you. It sounds amazing. We're very excited to have her. All right, everyone. Sarah, any last words that you want to remind me of, something we have to tell the group, or are we good?
Just reminding folks to send your announcements, your accomplishments, your sessions, things that you want to share with the rest of the folks, and we'll get those out to people.
Terrific. Listen, I'm going to stop the recording, and